Some paths lead you through straight and narrow. Others have bumps and turns. And sometimes the path can lead you to the rest of your life. Welcome to Ending the Stigma, a path to recovery. Okay, everybody, welcome to Ending the Stigma, a path to recovery. Today, we are joined by Scott H. Silverman, crisis coach and family navigator, and Mel, the science gal, she, her, and hers. Those are her call signs, I guess. She, her, and hers. How do you say that? What's the proper verbiage? What do you use the she, her, and hers for? What is the...
Those are my personal pronouns, so I'm being more inclusive of the transgender and queer communities.
Yes, that's what I meant to say. That's exactly what I meant to say. Exactly.
We got to get you some of those, Fred.
Yeah.
I'd like a couple as well. I just need to know for sure how to do it.
So today Mel is on a tighter schedule tonight, so she's only going to join us for a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes or so. And Mick Manhattan says hello. Hello, Mick. So we're going to start by letting Mel take the floor, and we're going to talk about the science of, she's got some science facts on cannabis and marijuana and whatever term you want to use to describe it. So give us some details of what, first of all, Scott, were you a marijuana smoker?
Only during waking hours. I really confined my time to waking hours. Yes. But back in my day, it was more like, hemp, rope. But yes, it was a big part of my daily routine.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see as we speak about this, we're going to have different opinions on certain things because I'm not an anti-marijuana type person. I don't think Mel is either from certain standpoints, and I don't know where you stand, Scott, but Mel's going to give us some science facts. Mel, read some of your stuff.
Okay. So, to give you some context, marijuana is the most commonly used illegal drug in the United States. And the principal psychoactive constituent of cannabis is cannabinoid tetrahydrocannabinol, and that's THC, what everyone knows, that's what gets you high. The psychoactive effects are primarily mediated by activation of cannabinoid receptors in the nervous system, and this results in a decrease in the concentration of cyclic AMP by inhibiting a certain enzyme that catalyzes the conversion of AMP to CMP. And if you remember from biology, AMP is the energy of your body that's produced by the mitochondria. And based on current studies, there is no known lethal dose of THC in humans. So nobody knows how much THC you need to ingest within a certain time frame to cause death. There are several acute short-term effects of using marijuana. Anxiety, panic, impaired attention and memory, increased risks of psychotic symptoms, the inability to think clearly, and increased risks of personal accidents. But there are also some heavy long-term chronic exposures, risk associated with chronic exposure. Chronic heavy smoking is associated with coughing and the production of phlegm and wheezing and other symptoms that are signs of chronic bronchitis. However, studies have shown that there's no causal relationship between cannabis use and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Some studies have suggested that smoking marijuana may increase your susceptibility to lung infections like pneumonia. And there are actually over 50 known carcinogens in cannabis smoke. And if you guys don't know, carcinogens are cancer-causing agents. It's a big problem found in tobacco also. And because of how you typically smoke marijuana, you take deeper and longer inhalations, it leads to 4 times the amount of deposition of tar in your lungs compared to when you smoke cigarettes. However, well-designed population studies have yet to show an increased risk for respiratory cancers that are linked to smoking marijuana. So those are some of just health effects. And then to give you guys an idea, as we've all heard, cannabis has been kind of approved in certain states for medical purposes, and some of the illnesses that we're aiming to treat with therapeutic cannabis include Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, cancer, Crohn's disease, immune disorders such as HIV, AIDS, and multiple sclerosis. It's used to treat aging disorders, epilepsy, glaucoma, various mental illnesses, and some seizures. So yeah, and then I was able to find some facts, things to think about as we're discussing our stances on whether or not our opinion is that it should or should not be legalized. It's estimated that the marijuana industry could exceed $24 billion in revenue by 2025. In Colorado, marijuana brings in 3 times more revenue to the state than alcohol. However, the societal cost of increased marijuana use, like more emergency room visits, medical care, treatments for addiction, they could outweigh the generated revenue. The annual societal cost from alcohol is about $223.5 billion, and tobacco costs about $193 billion, which exceeds the $24 billion tax revenue that they generate. Some other things to consider is legalizing marijuana. It would make it regulated, reducing the risks of accidental overdose with laced drugs that are typically bought on the street. And it would take money away from black markets and drug cartels. But on the other hand, marijuana is an addictive drug, and drug dependence could increase as we legalize and make it more societally acceptable. And then another big thing we should consider is that enforcement of marijuana prohibition shows a significant racial disparity. So even though white and black people use marijuana at roughly the same rate, a black person is actually 3.73 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession in the US. So those are some things to think about when you yourself are considering using marijuana or promoting your beliefs as to whether or not you think it should be legalized or decriminalized.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, we like listening. You're very smart. You definitely speak better than I do, because you heard me butcher all your scientific facts when you weren't on last week. And Scott told me, he said, "No more, buddy. No more. You can't loud."
It's unsafe for Fred to quote statistics he hasn't reviewed and doesn't understand. And when he tries to read some of the words, it's like, the comments we got were, is this show, actually taped in some part of Europe?
So Scott, what do you think about what she said? Where do you fall?
I think that's really good data, Mel. Thank you. Where I fall is this. I believe in medical marijuana, and I've believed in it since its, inception. I think it's a hugely positive tool for a lot of different issues. I mean, there's actually conversations now about, I heard it from the VA on a conference call was on a couple weeks ago about utilizing marijuana to help people, step down from, if you will, opioids. So, and we're in California, mm-hmm. It's legal here. To your point, Colorado, when they put this together originally, they had some real negative impact around, people using it, and a lot of people were coming in from other states to purchase it there. So I think mm-hmm. the cost and the benefit, is yet to be revealed. And I know that the federal government has talked about legalizing it nationally. So it really concerns me. My biggest fear about marijuana is when young people are utilizing it as a tool to anesthetize themselves or self-medicate. What they're unaware of, and there really aren't any longitudinal studies yet, but what the outcomes have been that's showing that what it does to the development of the brain for someone who's young, mm-hmm. who has a brain that's still developing, there's some real hardships around it. And there are a lot of people that are experts in the field of, looking at long-term effects on something that might be mood altering, or, people that are self-medicating. They see the issues with marijuana long-term, very much like what happened in the tobacco industry. So mm-hmm. those are my biggest concerns. So I just, I don't tell people not to do it. And I just really suggest, to what you've just shared, Mel, to get informed, understand, know that, you're putting things in your body that can have some long-term negative impact and pressure on it. And of course, I've heard it my whole life, marijuana comes from God's green earth, and it's grown and it's natural mm-hmm. and it's a plant. So it should be okay. And then there's the edibles that people are taking. And that is just interesting because there's no way to really quantify when you're taking it in your body, what's going to potentially mm-hmm. happen. And I've got a good friend who's mm-hmm. an emergency doc, and she talks about what she sees coming into the ER, and they call it scromiting, where people are actually screaming and vomiting from marijuana. actually a sense of an overdose where they've just gotten so sick from ingesting it or smoking it that, they're just out of control. They just need to be handled and dealt with. So, and the THC content is so high today. And I think you made a good point too, Mel, that people that are buying it on the street, we've had it happen here in San Diego where someone overdosed with heroin that was in marijuana. So, legalizing it, I don't think that's going to stop. So I tell families, just look at the information that's out there, stay informed, and just know that, you're putting something in your body that can harm you. You really need to take a hard look at the information. So at least you're making a decision knowing what the effects might be long-term.
Yeah. And that's what I like having Mel come in is she has the, with her there, she's giving facts without giving her opinion necessarily. And I'm aware, because I know her personally, of her opinions of it. But I think they all fall within the same as mine, which are, I'm not afraid to say that I have a few of my children smoke. I don't know if they're daily, but on occasion. And I know they've used it for anxiety reasons, depression reasons, and stuff like that. But I think that also falls into what Scott was just saying about self-medicating to do that when there's other ways. So I think there is a healthy balance. I personally never enjoyed that type of a high when I was younger and in the drug scene. I was more of an upper guy. I chased the uppers, not downers. And I probably should have chased the downers because the uppers kind of made me an asshole, I guess is the word. That's what it does to you sometimes.
And that's what you think that's what you think the causation was for you, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Sometimes it's organic, Fred. And meaning, it could be part of the makeup of the human being as well. So Mel, what is your opinion? You gave us some science facts. You mind sharing that?
Yeah, sure. Medical, definitely. Like, it's been proven to help, even if it's just to mitigate symptoms, especially it's so commonly prescribed to people who have chronic diseases that cause pain and like cancer. So you can't even argue that medical marijuana shouldn't be approved. For recreational use, my personal opinion that nobody has to listen to if they don't want to, I personally believe that it should be legal because people should be making their own choices. And it's my life, my body. If I decide to put something in it that's not good for me, that's my own problem. Not saying that also not saying that people who are addicted and have addiction problems did it to themselves. I'm not saying that. But as an adult, I should have the ability to make that choice for myself, to smoke marijuana or do whatever I would like. But I guess that's where I stand. I think the option should be there for everybody, but should we be promoting it and be like, hey, you should smoke marijuana every day instead of doing cocaine, or you should smoke marijuana instead of drinking alcohol? Like, no, it's not a solution. And if you're using it to self-medicate like I have in the past, it's definitely not something to get into. So there are definitely sides I see on both sides. I see both sides of the coin here.
Yeah, I get a question a lot from families that ask the question, do I think that marijuana is a gateway drug? And what's fascinating is when you look at the studies, there are studies that say absolutely, and there are studies that say no. So it's there's mixed reviews around it. But, one of the things because I work closely with the criminal justice system, when somebody gets arrested, they go through an interview process, especially if they're impaired. And they ask what they're on, what they've been using. And, what they find is people start marijuana is kind of a start drug, if you will, or a way to self-medicate, at kind of a low grade level, and experimentation with it, and I know people that are taking edibles that are my age now because they want to use it to help sleep, and they're really concerned about taking sleep medication. So they're using it as a sleep medication or an anxiety suppressor. So, I think, we've talked a little bit about the countries that have legalized all the drugs and how things are going. I think Portugal's done it. I believe Sweden's done it. But what they've done is they've said, look, we're going to decriminalize as much as we can. We're going to legalize as much as we can. But what they also do is they make sure that if anybody wants access to treatment, they get it immediately.
Yes.
There's no wait. There's an opportunity for it. And, one of the things I wanted to see in California, if they were going to legalize marijuana, which we have, that they take, half of the profits and put it towards the communities that need the resources to get help if someone happens to be one of those that's predisposed to addiction. So we can address that compulsive, obsessive, addictive behavior early on, so someone doesn't end up moving to other substances. Because look, like me, as somebody who was a drug seeker, if you like getting high, you like getting higher, so the bottom line is, if one's good, two's going to be better for that mindset, for the person who's got that maladaptive behavior. So I think we have to just inform ourselves. And I think over time, we're going to see marijuana, especially when they look at the initial revenue sources for the states. But I remember when they brought the lottery here to California, how it was going to help all the schools, and that hasn't happened. I mean, they have lottery offices all over the state. There's, they're employing a lot of people. And, as the lottery gets bigger and the wins get bigger, more and more people are playing. So we're proposing people actually go out and gamble to find a way to make easy money. So, I'm always hesitant, about that question, because I think it's real, but it's important who's asking it and what the audience is about. Yeah, but I agree. For medicinal purposes, I'd rather see somebody, take some edibles than take, any kind of narcotic, opioids of any kind, just because they're so much more addictive and they're so much more dangerous.
I think when you have all your using it as a gateway, the science behind being a gateway drug, I think it's a flawed type of study, because it's a gateway naturally, because like Mel said, it's the most used drug. So it's the most common and it's the most available. And it is, I would say 99.9% of anybody started with marijuana. It's just it's the natural first step. I guess it's similar to drinking a beer over drinking vodka. You start your drinking by tasting beer. Beer is usually the first thing, and it's just the most common that's available in the house and available. But I think it's an interesting conversation that we started. We're going to let Mel go if she's done. Are you done, Mel?
I actually want to add one thing.
Go ahead.
Based on, going off what we were saying, I actually think that this country needs to push the idea that alcohol is actually the biggest gateway drug. Before we start talking about, marijuana is a gateway drug, we shouldn't legalize it because it's a gateway drug, let's talk about alcohol. Almost everybody in this country has drank alcohol, and there are so many people and families that are affected by alcohol abuse, and that just kind of gets ignored when it comes to talking about addictions and talks about like gateway drugs and things. So remember, it all started likely with you drinking, not with you doing a drug. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Well, and alcohol clearly is legal and always has been, as far as we know. And you make a good point, because I in my world of people in recovery, I look at alcohol as a drug because it's mood altering, and that's where I started. So to your point, the idea of how do we, because there's more people, when you think about DUIs and being arrested and impaired driving, it's always been alcohol. And they don't even have a test yet for people that are impaired to test for marijuana or even opioids without a, UA. And they don't usually do that at sobriety checkpoints. They just, if that's certain, criteria that if you meet it, you're impaired, then they go to the higher level of doing testing. But right now, there are more people, not more, hundreds more percentage wise, that are being impacted by alcohol and alcoholism and families themselves than marijuana. And that's an argument I hear all the time, especially for the kids that are real smart and they've set up their defense already when their parents confront them, or they get unlucky. I just had a family last week where mom found a bag of weed under her son's seat in his car. So I said, what were you doing in his car looking under the seat? Well, it just kind of fell out. She was looking because she found some in his room and she wanted to confirm. So you're absolutely right. We can't ever leave alcohol out of the conversation because it kills more people annually, I believe, than any other drug.
Yeah, I would argue that it has done significantly more damage to more people's lives.
Wait, you want to
I
argue
know-
with you want to argue with me about that, or you just want to argue that it is?
No, I'm just arguing in general, talking like it has easily ruined more people's lives than I would say anything else.
Absolutely.
I know someone from I think we went to the same high school. She was driving, mind her own business. She got rear-ended by a drunk driver, and now she is paralyzed from the neck down. And she was 18 years old.
Yeah,
all because someone decided to drink and drive. So PSA, folks, don't drink and drive, and don't do drugs and drive.
Yeah. And now, they talk about texting. The texting right now is more causing more accidents on the people behind the wheel than even marijuana. So you're absolutely right. So I will argue with you.
Well, those are all good points. And I hope you enjoyed this segment, Mel. Just so you know, Mel, also that your high school is playing in the championship game tomorrow for basketball, girls basketball. So,
I wouldn't know, but that's cool.
Just so you know, you should be proud still. You should be proud of your alma mater. I know it was a long time ago. How old are you now, Mel?
25.
Wow.
I'm old.
Yeah, she's old. She's old, Scott.
I feel old.
She feels old, but
she's younger than both my kids.
I know. Yeah. Mine too.
I'm pushing 30.
Pushing 30 at 25.
As my cousin would say, she's only 26, that she's pushing 30.
Pushing 30. Okay, so maybe next week you'll join us and we'll have a new subject to talk about, and I'll speak to you off the air about that. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Sounds good.
And
now I'm going to kick you out. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
There goes Mel. Mel's gone. And that's okay. So what else you want to talk about, Scott? I know you had brought up going into the mental health side and sadly, the shooting starting again.
Yeah. I mean, what's today's date? Today's Wednesday. This happened, the incident in Boulder this week was just horrible. And last week in Atlanta. And, my heart goes out to all the families in the community. And it's just, it just, and that no one's found out yet what the cause was. Well, this kid was 21 years old, and what happened was just so catastrophic. And I think what I want to just share is how sad I felt when I heard the news and thinking that this individual, did they have a substance abuse issue? Were they, wound up in some sort of mental health issue? Because what it takes to be able to go out and do something like that just is not normal. So my sense will be when they finish the deeper dive and they get the information that there's something obviously not right with this kid. And that's the part that I'm concerned about, is how we're dealing with, the mental health issues right now, and thinking about people as we go back into the world again after getting, vaccinated or not, and things going back to what they call normalcy. I'm really worried about people. They're just, there's a lot of self-medication. There's been a lot of suicides. There's been a lot of domestic violence. There's been a lot of, child abuse. So what I worry about is what I think the word I heard the other day was despair. What are we going to do with this despair? How are we going to work with it right now? And, and it's interesting because in this environment, because people were homebound, I know in my industry, the substance use disorder treatment industry, people, a lot of businesses have been closing. They just haven't been able to sustain their businesses and keep their doors open because of all the inability of people going to treatment or being concerned about going to treatment during the COVID. So at the end of the day, when people start to raise their hand, if they do and say, I need help, how are we going to be able to service that? It's a conversation that's happening, at a very, kind of a lower level, and it's not on top of the list. And when you think about it, it's scary. And I'm real concerned about it. And I know, as a crisis coach, my phone should be ringing off the hook, and it's been quiet. And I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense, because I know people, when they do call me, they're in catastrophic stages with some family member. And, I'm going to give my phone number out. If you're hearing this, you're going to see this, call me, 619-993-2738. If I can't help you, I will find a way to get you help, or we'll find a way together, no matter what part of the country you're in, or if you're listening to this somewhere else. Just ask for help, reach out for help. And if you don't know how to do that and you're hearing this and you have a family member, let's get on it right away. Let's not wait, because there's not enough time that we're going to be able to reconstruct all the resources that we need. And I personally don't think we should look to the government for anything. You work within your community and you find those resources, because if we're going to wait for the government to help fix this, they're never going to. And the war on drugs, it ain't working. And access to mental health and support it's not getting tougher. It is tough, and it's been tough, and it shouldn't have to be that way. So that was what I wanted to share about. And of course, the gun issue, whether we want to go there or not, tonight, Fred, I don't know, but I'm worried about people not knowing how to reach out for help. That's my big concern.
I think our gun issues both fall under mental health anyway, because we both label or move it into that direction, that somebody that's, like you said, somebody that has the plan to do something like that clearly is not in a great mental state. It's not as easy as Alana said, saying the kid had a bad day. One bad day. I've had bad days. I haven't killed anybody.
I agree.
You don't just go out and that, and now we're into the political side of that, whether it was racially motivated, and they're saying it wasn't. I don't know what your opinion is. I tend to think it was racially motivated. When you take aim at one certain race, it tends to be racially motivated, but it still comes down to these guns. And I'm in Connecticut, and I'm near Newtown. I live near Newtown, Connecticut. So I've seen what this could do. And that's why I can't stand when people go into the conspiracy theories of this, and it's usually from outside of my area, because we have seen families who have been at events. Because one thing they did do for the 26 kids, I believe it was 26 of them. There are 26 parks, each one named after one of the kids in Connecticut. Now, that doesn't solve the problem, but it's not a conspiracy. The same problem is these semi-automatic weapons. And I'm not anti-gun by any means. I'm not a gun person, but I'm not anti-gun. It doesn't enter my life whether or not. I just know I personally don't have one and don't need one, or feel I need one. So,
well, and and the one of the cold hard facts is what I hate is when these catastrophic events happen, and our mayor just said it recently on another topic about what we had 3 homeless people killed, run over by somebody who was impaired, and our mayor said we need to do something about this. Well, you're a legislative leader. You're voted in. You have a sphere of influence and a platform. You can create and help affect systemic change. And when I listen to the politicians arguing about we need to do something, and I don't know how many more people have to die before the legislation of the leaders of this country do something. And even if every gun manufacturer in the world stopped making guns, the hard fact I'm referring to, there's well over 315 or 20 million weapons currently owned by Americans. So, no one, and I don't think, people need to surrender their guns. And I don't think people should have the right, but I think we have to put some parameters in. And more importantly, we have to start dealing with the mental health issue with people that are walking around, with weapons, because they're hurting people, and they don't just go after someone they don't like. They do the thing that they do. They don't even know these people. So it doesn't make sense to me. And, Colorado is a state, my God, they've had such, a horrible series of these events, and then to have these 2 within a week. And someone was inferring the other day, some mental health professional, that we're going to see a lot more of this because people are coming out of COVID and they're going to start acting out because they have not been able to manage their own personal well-being because of what they've had to do. And people who suffer from mental health issues, being left alone is the enemy. You do not get better on your own. And to your point, Fred, if this guy had some issues and he was, homebound, and then the sadness of obviously losing someone to the virus, and then all the ramifications with the families being impacted by it, and also the catastrophic events around losing a job, losing income, losing your home, you put all those factors together, we've got this perfect storm in front of us that is really, really scary.
Yeah, it is. And I think the COVID is playing a role in it, because I'm I have nothing to prove this from a scientific standpoint. I'm just going off common sense that if you have mental health issues and now you're a year since you've either had help, went and got help for that, or you stopped taking your meds, or even to a more drastic standpoint, had a year to, maybe you were planning to do this a year ago and now you've had a full year to make your plan even bigger, or I don't want to use the word better, but more successful from their end. There's just so many parameters, and it all comes down to the mental health. Because
Well, imagine you had a full-time job, then you lost your job because of what happened, and then you lost your medical insurance, and now you can't pay for your medication. I mean, it is just, so you're substituting one way or another. So, I don't like to say things like it's very scary, but I say it not to alarm anybody, but I just think that we need to stop looking outside of our sphere of influence for somebody else to fix something that we can take a little initiative with, get informed, and try to help the people we care about. Because everybody knows somebody. Everyone's got a friend or a family member that's close to them. And some of the news about this kid in Boulder, he had people around him. Some were saying that he had some behavioral issues. Well, was anybody reacting to it? And, again, then in the meantime, the politicians are arguing about which way they should vote and what they're going to do about it. And of course, if the president executes an executive order, that's only going to be a short-term piece. But if that's what it takes right now to try to get people's attention, and, when you look at everyone's sending around this data now. And one of the things I saw was a list of all these different shootings, and the average weapon used was an AR-15. So, that's a semi and, automatic weapon that, if you're out there, hobby shooting, that's one thing, but it's a weapon that's been used in almost all of these major catastrophic shooting events. And we had a situation here in San Diego, was a year and a half ago. Our best, one of my wife's friends she grew up with, was shot at a temple. And it was a young guy that was just angry, upset, whatever it was. And it's horrible for families. And because it's one of those kind of things that, why are we doing this to each other? Why is this happening? How do we find a way to create some change around it?
Yeah, it's going to be, if we leave it up to the politicians, it's not going to get done, because I've seen it. Look, we're a small state, Connecticut, and this happened to young children, which affected, young children as a way of affecting masses across the world, but nothing's changed from a political standpoint. It's still the same, 6-day waiting period or whatever. I mean, this kid in Colorado, I guess he bought the gun 6 days prior,
right?
That he used, which means for 6 days he had this idea, at least at a minimum of 6 days. I don't think he just woke up with that idea that day, but that gives him. I mean, there's nothing in place from the minute he signs those papers, which is his American right. That's fine. He's 21, American right to buy the gun. Okay, so he goes in, but after that, does that paperwork just go to another desk and get a stamp? Is anybody actually doing the background check? Did anybody call? If you're going, sometimes when you're going into, for instance, if I had a friend that joined the FBI, it took them 9 months to get that job because they had to interview me. They interviewed everybody in his circle to make sure he was the right fit for that job. But is anybody interviewing the inner circle of the person that applied for the gun to see if he's the right person to hold that gun? Can he properly, has he been on, I don't know what the criteria could be though. I mean, how far back do you judge people? Because just like you fall into it, are they going to judge you off of what you did 40 years ago? Or are they going to judge Scott off of what he's done in the last 10 years?
Well, and I think this kid, in Boulder, he, and we're obviously, not overly informed on all the facts because there aren't a whole lot of them, but he evidently didn't have a history. I think at 17, they mentioned, by the way, and I've never heard it, in California, if you're a juvenile, they never talk about it publicly, but somehow they brought it out that he had an incident, where he was he was says he was being bullied, but he actually hit somebody, and I don't know if he was detained and arrested, but that was in his file. But ultimately, if you think about it, if they did a background check on him from now until the age of 18, evidently there was nothing there. It's interesting. Somebody, we're talking about the voter rights right now and everything's going on in Georgia. It's more difficult to become eligible to vote than it is to buy a gun. So again, I don't want to take anyone's rights away, but to your point, we need to put some sort of speed bumps in place. So if somebody has a history, but again, even if that became a law tomorrow, what are you going to do with all the weapons that people currently own? So to me, it's not a matter of taking away people's weapons. It's a matter of educating people and finding ways to, if someone's got a problem, they've got to have the ability to get access to help immediately rather than wait in line or have to figure out how they get insurance to get the help they need. So, in countries where there's socialized medicine, you don't have to wait. I mean, I was in Amsterdam in the 70s and I hurt my foot and I walked into a hospital because I just couldn't stand anymore and didn't realize that it was free to anybody. And they fixed me up and stitched me up and then I went back on my journey. But it was the kind of thing that we've talked about in this country for a long time. We have to make it easier for people to get help, and rather than putting up barriers to prevent people from getting the kind of support they need. That's my opinion.
And less stigma on those people, so they're not uncomfortable getting help. But
going to have to reduce the stigma. And what was in the paper the other day? 5 people in the White House were just terminated because they had marijuana in their history.
Yeah, and that
I just thought about that.
Right, and now is that right? Is it wrong? That's all opinion based too. But the science that we learned today, I would say that was quite extreme, because I'm going to I'll go out on a limb and say 95% of the world has marijuana in their history somewhere, even if it's just a hit or a puff, everybody's tried it for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there's still grandparents out there that have never and stuff, but it's got to be in the 90 percentile at least.
It's pretty high. I mean, most people, I think the statistic I heard about young, middle school and high schoolers is something like 65% of them, based on, recent studies, last 3 to 5 years, have experimented with marijuana. And if they were to go and fill out a form today and someone said, did you ever experiment with marijuana? And then they had to take a, polygraph or a lie detector test. They would, if they lied, they could not get hired because they lied. So it is a big controversy. And I think the marijuana, I know the Veterans Administration, like I mentioned earlier, they're wrestling with it right now because of, there's a huge amount of veterans who are injured or have suffered from PTSD who are taking medication to try to deal with that. And they want to replace it because, the Surgeon General's just come out and said, opioids for pain doesn't work. And, people that are addicted to certain medications that want to get off of it because the medication's killing them and not really helping like everyone thought it would, they want to try to substitute with marijuana, and they don't know how to deal with that, specifically in states where it isn't legal, which is, I think, one of the reasons why the feds wants to legalize it. So, and the thinking is that we'll take the business away from other countries who export, other drugs to our country, but they won't. They're replacing it right now. Fentanyl is being manufactured and distributed out of Mexico. And Mexico, in my opinion, did it because they wanted to compete with China. So we are a society that seems to be the consumer that most of the world wants to draw into, because maybe we have disposable income or we have ways to go. So we're being targeted, if you will, and we're susceptible to it. And we're also a very pill-oriented society. I mean, kids are getting an Adderall, at single digits to help them concentrate. And that's a pharmaceutical methamphetamine, basically. It's a methamphetamine. It's a stimulant. So if you figure you're giving a kid a drug at that young age, then one day you take it away from them, the body's going to want to replace it with something. So is the mind.
Yeah, and the commercialism of the drug industry also plays a role. I mean, half those commercials you see for a drug or something, first of all, you could never take the time to read any of the warning signs that are 30 seconds long of a list that just speeds by you. But you have no problem seeing the pretty girl on the beach, in a bikini jumping on a boat because she took some pill and, it plays games and it's all marketing. The marketing in this country is put ahead. The business is put ahead of the mental health of the people that are watching. They even target look at how they target the Jerry Springer show. They target all those shows during the day when people are home, hungover or not feeling well or high on drugs, and they're their target. And then these doctors hand it out like it's candy.
Yeah, I talk about it in my new book, The Opioid Crisis, I'm hoping to have out in April. One of the interesting factoids I heard in California when marijuana was going to be legalized, the venture capital people, the investors, the operators, the entrepreneurs that wanted to get involved, guess where they went to learn about distribution? The tobacco industry, because nobody probably did as good a job as they have, maybe Budweiser was getting their product out there or Jack Daniels, but the tobacco industry had distribution centers all over the world. So that's where they went as a model to use to get marijuana out in the hands of people, while they're figuring out, who's going to get licensed to distribute it and sell it at retail. But that was the model they wanted to follow. And a lot of people believe, like I shared earlier, the tobacco industry's what it did to society in its desire to make a profit caused so anything around the throat and the mouth from cigarette smoking, if you will, and then vaping came in to help diminish some of that. And so cigarette smoking's diminished, they say, especially with young people, but the vaping has become a new tool to bring chemicals into the body.
Yeah, and the vaping, what always blows. So first of all, I'm a vapor. I vape, but I was a smoker. So this is just me speaking. It's not a scientific fact, but I was always confused. My daughter started vaping. Now, my daughter never smoked cigarettes or anything. To me, that makes zero sense. For me, it makes sense. I used it for what it was intended initially, was as something to take me away. And I did quit smoking. I quit smoking 3 years ago. But now I quit vaping. Then I went back to it. Then I quit. Now I vape with no nicotine. That makes no sense. There's no sense in it. It's a binky. It's a pacifier. That's all it is. Chew on a pen cap.
Yep.
A toothpick. But
I mean, and if we could go back in time, my guess would be, because one of the guys that I think owns Juul, the company, that was gotten in a lot of trouble because they were one of the biggest manufacturers, and they were, I think, sold to Philip Morris. But they talked about, I think their original organic thinking was to create a tool for young people to eliminate cigarette smoking and replace it with vaping. But what's happening with vaping is it's become a vessel for THC and, liquefying marijuana and putting it into a vessel to get into the body. Because when you smoke, it goes right to the lungs and it goes to the brain, in some ways much quicker than taking an edible. So, again, I really believe when they first started out, that was going to be a positive tool. And to your point, I would say, look, if you have a choice between cigarette smoking and vaping, I would rather see someone vaping, if you will, than smoking, carcinogens and putting that into your body, because that can create all kinds of things orally and for the stomach and the throat. And if you're predisposed to get that kind of cancer, if you smoke long enough, you get it. I mean, I was a smoker. I mean, when I finished my tenure of smoking, I was smoking 3 packs a day back in the 80s. So when I quit, I quit, but it took a long time. And I'm sure that period of time in my life, it's going to be part of the reason I don't maybe live to 100, but I stopped because I was getting annoyed at people who were getting annoyed at me at smoking. But
yeah.
I quit because I thought, well, gee, if I gave up alcohol and I gave up drugs, and I'm convinced, but I have a cigar now and then, and I like that a lot, but I'm not inhaling, but still it's the carcinogen that's going into the mouth. So,
I quit mostly for financial reasons, was the number one reason. I mean, in Connecticut, it's about $11, $12 a pack. That's a lot of money when you're smoking a pack a day. But I can't tell people out there that, first of all, I was a heavy smoker, a pack and a half a day. It is possible to be done. You don't need it as much as you think. I see people that bounce back and forth saying, oh, I got into a fight with my boyfriend, so I had to smoke a cigarette. I had to, those are all excuses to smoke. But there is an award to it. I feel better today than I did 3 years ago. And I'm 3 years older, obviously, but I feel healthier today. So there is a payoff to it. But Scott, I think that's going to end the show. We didn't get any calls. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to find a sweet spot of timing what people want. So if you could reach out to us and let us know what's a good time for you, and I'll send out some stuff on our board, because we have 500 people in our group, but we're not getting 500 people watching live, which is fine. Everybody's got a life and they're busy at different times. But if we could find that sweet spot to help you guys be able to view us live, that's great. But we also we see that you do watch the show from the pre-recorded and stuff. But once again, the phone line is open, 888-261-2220. We're going to sign off now, but save the number, call it whenever. It's virtually anonymous. So just so people know, when they do call in, it comes through my cell phone. So I will see who it is, but nobody live on the air sees a name, a number, or anything. And if you want to remain anonymous to me, you could *67 before you dial the number. It's all possible. And we just want to hear your views. You know, we're not afraid to have a conversation. That's what we're all about, is the conversation here and ending the stigma. We want to hear from the addicts. We want to hear from the past addicts. We want to hear what worked for you, what didn't work for you. If you disagree with us, we want to hear that. So, and we're willing to, our minds can be changed. They've been changed before. You know, we're just going off statistics, and there's no script here. We just know what we're going to talk about going into a show. So
and let us know how smart we are, or let us know how smart we're not. We want the feedback, you know, and look, you know, we just shifted to middle of the week, hump day. My thinking was, you know, people coming off of weekends have some sad stories, maybe some happy stories, and maybe we can help you do some planning before the next weekend. So this was a shift that we did logistically this week. And as you start to get interested, if you've got a topic that you think would be helpful and you want to talk about it, you know, we'll figure out a way to get you in and have you join and be part of. So I don't think there's any limits to what we can't do. And Fred and I both are very committed to creating a forum. So if you want to say something, or you feel you need to say something, or you're hurting, we're here for you.
Yep. And listen, we're going to keep doing it every week, regardless. We both enjoy, I guess the word's not enjoy, but we like doing this live format. It's working for us. There's always something to talk about. And whether or not calls come in, I still think this is a successful venture that eventually is going to grab people and they'll be watching it more. It's a marathon. But please, anybody out there that does listen faithfully, share it with your friends, share it with people. Help us market it better. Give us advice if you have advice for that, because I don't know everything on this art. But so that's it. That's going to be it for Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery. Thank you for joining me, Scott. I like seeing you every week.
There you go.
And we will see you guys next week. We don't even know when yet, but we're going to discuss that. So we'll see you later, everybody.